Right, we come to the urgent question. Andrew Bowie.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. To ask the Secretary of State for Energy and Security and Net Zero if he will make a statement on gas storage levels.
Start.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Energy security is a key priority for this government, and at no time was there any concern about Britain's energy system being able to meet demand. Our systems worked entirely as intended. We had capacity to deal with market constraints, and this has been backed up by the two authoritative voices on this in the country, National Gas, who run the gas network, and the National Energy System Operator. We have sufficient gas supply and electricity capacity to meet demand this winter due to our diverse and resilient system. While storage is an important flexibility tool in the gas system, our varied sources of gas supply means that the UK is less reliant on storage than some other European countries who have more limited supply options. Our diverse options include the UK continental shelf, our long-term energy partner Norway, international markets via the second largest LNG onshoring capacity in Europe, and two interconnectors. Gas storage is used throughout the year but typically operates in winter to help meet peaks in demand. Through colder spells, storage levels are expected to fluctuate across the winter period. This is what happened last week following the severe cold weather, and is a sign that the gas market and storage market is working exactly as it should. This is precisely the reason we have these systems in place. In their winter outlooks, National Gas and the Energy System Operator assessed that there is sufficient supply to meet winter demand, including the role of storage. And on Friday, National Gas, the owner and operator of Britain's gas networks, confirmed that the overall picture across Great Britain's 8 gas storage sites remains healthy. We will continue to work closely with National Gas, the NESO and storage operators to maintain continued security of supply. But, Mr. Speaker, I reiterate to the House that Britain's energy system is working to continue to meet the demand of consumers right across the country.
Andrew Bowie.
All of our constituents will be aware of the freezing temperatures experienced across the United Kingdom last week, dipping to -18 in the north of Scotland. However, many will not be aware of just how close this country came to an energy shortage, to blackouts or demand control, closer than at any point in the last 15 years. On Friday, Centrica, the owners of British Gas, issued a stark warning that freezing weather and spike in demand had reduced our gas storage to concerningly low levels, 26% lower than at this time last year. And at a time when temperatures dropped below freezing for an extended period of time, our stores were set to last for less than a week. Earlier in the week, the National Energy System Operator, NESO, issued a call for electricity providers to step in to provide extra electricity to meet demand and to limit the risk of blackouts, paying 10 times the average daily amount to keep the lights on, all of which will end up on our constituents' energy bills. With an incredibly tight margin between demand and available power generation, we were once again forced to rely on reliable gas power plants to keep the lights on in this country, showing that gas is and will be a vital component of our energy security for decades to come. But with their rush to meet the Secretary of State's ideological target to decarbonise the entire electricity grid by 2030, this government is playing fast and loose with our ability to keep the lights on. This government is rushing headlong into a renewable energy-dominated system, a Chinese renewable energy-dominated system. But ministers cannot escape the fact that when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, wind turbines and solar panels will not keep the lights on in Britain. Mr. Speaker, be in no doubt that this government's ideological plans for our energy supply will leave the UK dependent on foreign imports, send bills soaring and leave us teetering on the brink of blackouts. Interestingly, Mr. Speaker, in 2010, when last in government, the Secretary of State whipped his ministers to vote against Conservative proposals to increase gas storage capacity in the United Kingdom, with a Labour MP on the Energy Bill Committee back then saying, and I quote, that the climate of this country, other than in the past month, is usually such that we do not need quite the same storage facilities as other countries do in mainland Europe. So can I ask the Secretary of State whether or not he, or the Minister, whether or not he thinks the Secretary of State regrets not backing that proposal in 2010? Does he accept that the push towards renewables and higher levels of intermittency will, and does he accept that we will need to urgently review our gas storage capacity in the immediate future?
Minister, Andrew.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'd start by saying that the the Shadow Minister's point would be well made if it wasn't for the fact that it was completely untrue. And if we look at the facts, the capacity market notice that he mentions was cancelled within 31...
Can I just say, that was a direct hint that it was untrue, so are we really sure of what you said, or would you like to reterm it?
I apologise, Mr Speaker. I think the Shadow Minister was confused in the facts that he gave to Parliament today, and I'm very happy to set that right, and I apologise to you, Mr Speaker. So let's look at the facts from the National Energy System Operator, the actual people who run the system, who say very clearly, at no point where electricity supplies less than anticipated demand, and our engineers were able to rebalance the system without the need to consider any emergency measures. And so I think if we actually listen to the experts, to National Gas and to NESO, both confirmed over the weekend that there was resilience in the system. And I would reiterate the point that the system operated exactly as it was intended to do so. And I'd add, Mr Speaker, that if the Shadow Minister has complaints about how the system operates in this country, about the gas storage situation that we have, he may want to look at some of his colleagues who were in power over the past 14 years. He knows the truth about his party's record. He's a very smart guy. He knows they left us exposed. He knows they didn't do enough to build the system that we now need, and he knows what caused the worst cost of living crisis in living memory. And meanwhile, while his party's busy crowdsourcing policy advice on Twitter from net zero sceptics, I think it would be far better if they looked at their own record in government and, instead of criticising us, recognised that we're getting on with building the resilient energy system for the future.
Chair of the Select Committee, Bill Esterson.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Well, the Shadow Minister missed from his story the role of Liz Truss as the Chief Secretary to the Treasury in 2017, who made the decision to close our gas storage facility. So I'll just say this to the Minister. Does he agree that if we want energy security and lower prices, this all depends on reducing our reliance on the volatile nature of the international fossil fuel market? And doesn't that mean that his Clean Power Action Plan for 2030 is exactly the right policy to address the events of the last few days?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Well, I thank my honourable friend for the question. Of course, he's absolutely right. The decisions the previous government took on storage are for them to answer, and I think anyone that looks at the record on that will raise, rightfully, questions about that. But on the broader point, he's absolutely right. The only plan on how we can get us off the volatile fossil fuel markets that the previous government left us far too exposed to is the Clean Power Action Plan that we've announced. And if the party opposite opposes that, they need to come up with what their alternative would be to deliver the resilience in the system that we're fighting for every single day.
Pippa Heylings, the Liberal Democrats.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Right Honourable Member for West Aberdeenshire and Kincardine is right to raise this important question around the security of energy. Gas supplies are running low because of the unexpected cold snap over the last 2 weeks. Whilst those who can afford it have continued to use gas, the energy crisis has left energy prices skyrocketing, energy bills spiralling, with many having to make the decision between putting food on the table or staying warm, which is the case for too many families in my constituency in South Cambridgeshire. However, Mr Speaker, the Right Honourable Member accused the government of playing fast and loose, and I must say that it's due to the decisions of the last Conservative government that we find ourselves in this mess. Their reckless dither and decay over insulation and decarbonising our homes, the irresponsible decision around our gas storage capacity. This is about over-reliance on gas. Over-reliance on gas. For too long...
No, I'm not going to sit down. Please. You're over time, so I'm sure you're coming to the end.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I would like to ask what steps the government is taking to reduce over-reliance on gas by bringing in an emergency upgrade home scheme and also enabling people to both insulate and keep their homes warm with heat pumps. Now, not wait to spring, but this winter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Honourable Lady for her question. She is, of course, right. This is an incredibly important issue, but it gets to the heart of the fact that what we inherited from the previous government wasn't just an economic mess, but a series of policy decisions not made, a system that needed us to take serious decisions quickly and to build the energy system that's got the resilience for the future. So she's right on that point. On the broader point she raises about consumers, she'll know that my honourable friend, the Minister for Consumers, is doing a lot of work to look at exactly what warmer homes the scheme will look like in the future, to make sure people have as warm a home as possible, because she is right that at times like this in particular, it's people in the poorest households that struggle the most. We're doing what we can to make sure that homes are insulated, but also in the long term to bring down bills. And of course the only way to do that is to deliver clean power by 2030 faster than the previous government would ever have managed.
Polly Billington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Shadow Minister comes to the House with no shame.
No shame.
As already has been referred to by my honourable friend, we must be reminded that it was his party that closed Rough in 2017, leaving us exposed. Now, can I commend the Minister for taking urgent steps through our Clean Power mission to secure our energy system, and can I urge him to ignore the political distractions that the party opposite are putting forwards?
Yeah.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for her point. She is right that, of course, this government is moving as fast as possible to build a more resilient system, to get people, to get the country off the roller coaster of volatile fossil fuel markets. The party opposite now seems to oppose that. But, of course, they have been on something of a journey on all of these questions, from the party that used to champion net zero, that used to recognise that climate change was a clear and present danger to the world. Now they are drifting further and further away from that, looking for more and more extremist views on Twitter and elsewhere for how they can crowdsource their policy development. We're getting on with building the energy system to bring down bills, to deliver energy security, and yes, to deliver climate leadership.
Sir Bernard Jenkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The National Electricity System Operator issued a warning of a 1,700 megawatt shortfall at the evening peak, but they revised that down to barely more than 1,200, and they in fact were running at one point with only 580 megawatts of margin. So how is the government so complacent about this? It is astonishing. And can I just warn the right honourable member that, having, as someone who's followed the energy debate for the last 30 years or so, that this is almost unprecedented, and for him to say everything was absolutely fine is incredibly irresponsible when his own government's policies are contributing to the tightness of the generating margin. And can I ask him, if the lights go out, will he resign?
Well, I have to say, Mr. Speaker, this is the kind of extremist scaremongering that we've come to expect from the Shadow Secretary of State on Twitter, but we're now hearing it in the House as well. It is thoroughly irresponsible to use language like that in this debate, because I read at the beginning in my answer the very clear view of the National Energy System Operator, who is in fact the people who run the system, who are the experts in this, who say quite clearly, and I repeat it for the benefit of the House, at no point were electricity supplies less than anticipated demand, and our engineers were able to rebalance the system without the need to consider emergency measures. Now, the Shadow Minister, backbench MPs can repeat all they like the phrasing around blackouts, but at no point was that a concern. And the reality is that while the party is happy to throw around phrases like that without any evidence, we are building the resilient system of the future, and we'll get on with doing that.
Luke Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Minister agree with me that it was in government that the party opposite saw the closure of Rough and reduced gas storage? In opposition, they oppose our proposals for clean power, which would see this country more reliant on gas, volatile gas markets and higher energy prices. Isn't it the truth that it is the position of the party opposite that they want us to be more reliant on gas, higher bills, more likelihood of blackout because they oppose our plans for clean power and runaway and accelerating climate change?
Minister.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his question. I mean, the decision on whether to run gas storage sites or not is a commercial decision for Centrica. Of course, the storage site at Rough was closed between 2017 and 2022. The time, if honourable members may remember, was when the beast from the east was attacking the country. So, but the previous government will have to answer for the decisions that they made on that. We are making it very clear that the only way in the long term that we can build the energy system that we need is the Clean Power Action Plan. The previous government used to support much of that, but increasingly has decided to walk away from that. They will have to come up with their own plan for how they either keep us longer and longer attached to the volatile fossil fuel markets, dealing with all of the price spikes that we've seen, that all of our constituents continue to pay the price for, or they come up with an alternative plan. We're getting on with doing the work.
Sir Julian Lewis.
Well, can I encourage the Minister to come out of combat mode for a second and consider a constructive proposal? If we are not to become redependent upon gas when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, and we don't want to be dependent on foreign countries indefinitely, can he see a role, a future role, for modular nuclear reactors?
Minister.
Well, I thank the right honourable gentleman for his question. If I'm in any kind of attack mode, it's because the party opposite doesn't seem to be dealing with reality, and I think it is important to correct that. But he's right, of course, that the future energy mix, as we outlined in the Clean Power Action Plan, will involve a range of technologies. We outlined the range for each of those that we would expect. Nuclear will play an incredibly important part in that, in particular small modular reactors, and we're moving forward with the programme we inherited from the previous government, but it was yet another process that was incomplete. We're now moving forward to make that happen as quickly as possible, and SMRs will play a key role in our energy mix.
Derek Twiggs.
Mr. Speaker, following on from the last question, clearly the government did delay investing and starting up more nuclear power opportunities and options.
That's right.
So can I ask the Minister what progress has been made on plans since it came into power in terms of taking forward plans for nuclear power as part of our supply?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for that question. I mean, the party opposite shouts when. They had 14 years, and in 14 years didn't build a single new nuclear project. The former Minister for Nuclear loves to shout about all of the consultations that he launched, but didn't build a single new nuclear power station. So my honourable friend is right to make the point that we should be moving forward with this. We want to see nuclear projects move forward as quickly as possible. My honourable friend, the Minister for Nuclear, is moving forward with two of the biggest projects, but also with the competition for the small modular reactors. We are going through a process, quite rightly, to make sure that that is as robust as possible, but we'll have more to say in due course.
Mr. Speaker, last Friday I met with Wales and West Utilities, who run the gas grid in my Bath constituency and beyond. They tell me that hydrogen in home heating is still a very viable option. There have been a number of pilots, but the government has recently gone quite quiet on hydrogen in home heating. Can the Minister update us on what steps he's taking to progress hydrogen in home heating?
Well, the Honourable Lady raises an important question about the potential of hydrogen in our energy mix. Of course, one of the real strengths of the gas network at the moment is that it can be changed into other things in the future. That's a real strength of what we have. We're looking at what those options might look like. There's a mix of options available with hydrogen, of which home heating might be one of them. But hydrogen could still play a really key role in industrial projects, for example, in the shorter term. We are looking at those projects. We need to make sure, of course, that it's financially viable and that that all the technological details have been worked out on how we would actually make that happen. But we'll have more to say about that in due course.
Speaker, my understanding is that these notices are issued at times of high demand, and they are evidence of the system working to prevent the need for any power cuts or for the system to break down. I would have thought that the Conservatives would have learnt the lesson from the spike in international gas prices that caused the crisis in people's fuel bills that led to a cost of living crisis. They've learnt nothing from that. And does my right honourable friend agree with me that this really underlines our policy of making sure we have a secure provision of renewable energy that leaves us less open to spikes in prices on the international market?
Minister.
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right in the point that he makes, and it is worth just saying the electricity margin notices are not unexpected, particularly at this time of year. It means that there is enough generation available to meet demand, but that NISO would like to see a larger safety cushion. And I think this is the important point for people to really understand about what the margin notice is actually about. Of course, it was cancelled because, in fact, there was sufficient to ensure that cushion anyway. But my honourable friend makes the broader point that is important. We've outlined in great detail how we'll deliver clean power by 2030. The party opposite now claim to oppose that and oppose much of net zero full stop. In fact, they'll have to answer for how they would deliver the secure, resilient energy system of the future that brings down bills and delivers on climate leadership.
Dougal. Thank you, Mr Speaker. In parliamentary language, I'm unconvinced by the Minister's reassurance that the lights didn't almost go out last week. I'm also unconvinced that he says the system is robust and resilient. And for context, that's because this is the Minister that told electors in Scotland that energy bills would come down by £300 under this government, and they've gone up and they're going to go up twice again. So what steps will he take, given the perilous situation with the gas storage, 1% compared to 25% that the EU enjoy? What will he do to de-stress that system by accelerating investment in long-duration energy storage?
Minister. Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his characteristic question. On the first point, let me just say it wasn't me that said anything about what the margins were. I quoted, and I'll quote again for the benefit of the honourable gentleman, the National Energy System Operator, who actually delivers in this country at no point where electricity supplies less than anticipated demand, and our engineers were able to rebalance the system. That's the words of the people who actually run the energy system, not from me. So he can take or leave my word. I'm not particularly bothered, but that's the words from the people who actually operate the energy system. On his final point, though, I absolutely do agree with him about the importance of long-duration energy storage. That's why, for the first time in 40 years, this government announced a new cap and floor scheme to deliver new long-duration energy storage schemes. That's a huge shift forward from many previous governments that will build the pumped hydro schemes and new innovative technologies to deliver that energy storage. We're moving as fast as possible. I hope him and his honourable friends will support those decisions.
Matt Rolder.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And can I thank the Minister for updating and also reassuring the House and residents about the robustness of the system, and also for his work taking forward a wider diversification of energy supply. As part of that, could he update the House on work to support the take-up of heat pumps to ensure that in the long run we are far less dependent on gas supplied from overseas? And also, could he also update us on the importance of insulation and what the government is doing to support further measures to encourage insulation?
Minister. Well, I thank my honourable friend for his question. He's right, of course, that as well as building the energy system that will deliver the generation capacity for the future, we also need to work as fast as possible to reduce demand. And part of that is around moving away from gas to heat pumps, which is important not just for our energy system and for climate, but also for individual households to reduce their bills as well. And we're already seeing a huge shift in the uptake of heat pumps across the country. There's much more to do on that, of course, to reach the target that we need to get to, but it's something that we're committed to as a government, and it's important, I think, for households right across the country. And I echo his points around insulation. Of course, we know that those in fuel poverty are more likely to live in houses that are cold, and the more that we can do to create warmer homes, as my honourable friend, the Minister for Consumers, is doing, the better for everyone.
Speaker. Last week was the coldest week of the winter, and also last week 41.9% of our energy mix was gas. Just about 25% was from wind. We've also heard, of course, issues with gas storage, but we also know that this government is penalising the oil and gas sector with increasing the windfall tax, extending the windfall tax, not allowing new licences, and removing investment allowances. It feels like this government is not taking our current energy security seriously. And with that in mind, can he reassure the House that this is not the case, that he will engage with our oil and gas companies to ensure that we are secure in our energy today, despite what they're trying to do in the future?
Minister. Well, I thank the honourable lady for her question, and I can give that assurance. And indeed, every month that I've been in this job, I've been in Aberdeen meeting oil and gas companies to discuss their issues. And of course, we're not going to agree on everything, but what I have been very clear on is that there will be a long future in oil and gas in the North Sea. We have said, yes, absolutely, that we don't want to issue any new licences for new fields, but we won't revoke any existing licences, and that means that there will continue to be work in the North Sea for a long time to come. But I repeat the point that it's categorically untrue to say that our electricity or gas supplies have been at risk over the past week. We have robust systems in place. Those systems worked exactly as they should have, and consumers therefore lost absolutely no supply over the course of the last few days, and nor will they in the weeks and months ahead.
Lawrence Turner.
The Energy Minister at the time, now the Noble Lord Harrington, said that the closure of Rough will not cause a problem with security. Will the Minister confirm that the 5 wasted years that followed before Rough was reopened at reduced capacity continues to impose restraints on the network, and will the Government take an open-minded approach to Centrica's proposals to gradually convert that storage capacity to hydrogen?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for the question. Of course, these are commercial decisions for Centrica to take forward. If they bring those decisions to us, we will, of course, look at them. But fundamentally, it is a decision for Centrica themselves. I would just reiterate that the UK has a robust set of storage facilities to ensure security of supply. Rough is one of them, but actually, at moments in the winter like this, isn't the most important out of all of the storage facilities, because it is the slowest to move gas into the system. The remainder are in a completely robust state and will continue to deliver, but it's a commercial matter for Centrica what they choose to do with their site.
John Cooper.
Mr Speaker, thank you. We've heard in the House today about an over-reliance on gas. Surely the reality is that it's an over-reliance on imported gas. And the policies of this government seem to be driving us into the hands of foreign suppliers. As much as 80% of our gas may by 2030 be imported. Should we not instead be supporting the domestic sources of oil and gas, backing the 200,000 jobs in every constituency in this land, rather than pushing those people off a cliff?
Minister.
Well, I would take issue with 2 points. First of all, in the past decade, there have, of course, already been 100,000 jobs lost from the oil and gas industry. The industry is changing, and that was under a government that he supported. What we're doing is now putting in place a robust set of plans for how we support that workforce into the jobs of the future, rather than burying our heads in the sand and pretending that what is a super mature basin in the North Sea isn't a super mature basin, which it is. But I would make this other point, that even if we were to extract more gas from our own continental shelf, it is traded, of course, on an international market, the pricing of which is not set by us, but set by the international markets. We would continue to pay more for that gas, whether or not it came from the North Sea. So it doesn't deal with the pricing issue that he reflects in his question.
Samuel Wilson.
Mr Speaker, did the Minister assume that, having robbed pensioners of the winter fuel allowance, that gas consumption would go down? Or is this government so obsessed with its net zero policy that it doesn't really care whether we have enough gas to meet our energy needs? And does he not realise that being reliant on foreign suppliers will push up fuel prices in the UK? How does he justify the policy of ignoring the fact that we have 150 years of gas naturally stored in the United Kingdom, yet his policy of net zero means that we don't use it?
Well, I reiterate the point I made a moment ago, that even if we were to take much more gas out of our own continental shelf, it's traded on the international market. And, of course, the reason that his constituents, my constituents, are still facing a cost of living crisis is because of our exposure to those petrostates and dictators all around the world. He clearly would like to expose us even more to that. I think the party opposite would support him in that. We want to get us off this roller coaster of volatile fossil fuels and deliver a clean power system that's cheaper in the long run and that delivers energy security. That's what's best for consumers and for all our constituents.
Sir Alex Shelbrooke.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Minister has several times mentioned energy security and the drive to net zero to try and make us more energy secure. But Europe, having learnt the lesson of taking fossil fuels from Russia, we are now going to be taking our renewable resources from China. They manufacture and process the vast majority of the materials needed. So may I ask the Minister, what contingency plans has he put in place if China decide to go into a trade war with the UK on renewables or cut off supply, because the threats that could come from China to this country are exactly the same as the threats that came from Russia in terms of fossil fuels?
Yeah.
Well, I'd say to the honourable gentleman 2 things. First of all, of course, our approach to China is that we will cooperate where it's in our interest to do so, and we will challenge where it's necessary to do so. That's the point that the Chancellor is making at the moment. But the second point I would make is that, of course, the way to make sure that that doesn't happen to make sure that actually we build as much as possible in this country, is to build an industrial base here in this country, to bring the jobs of clean power here to the UK. The previous government failed to do that. We are now driving forward an industrial strategy which will make sure that the jobs that build the clean power plan we've designed are actually in this country. They can either support that or oppose it.
Lisa Smart.
Mr. Speaker, this whole discussion this afternoon underlines to me the importance of electricity storage, such as at the battery energy storage system in my constituent, the Bredbury substation. And I wonder if the Minister would like to take this opportunity to talk about how we can encourage more communities to welcome BESSes to their areas, perhaps by considering community benefit, things like district heat networks.
Excellent.
Minister.
Well, I think the Honourable Lady makes a really important point, not just about energy storage and its various forms, and indeed battery storage is moving forward extraordinarily quickly in terms of the technology. The amount of short duration time that we can get from batteries moving quite considerably. So batteries will play a key role, but also I think really importantly the potential of communities to drive some of that. So we've been really clear with our local power plan that we want communities to be in the driving seat as much as possible of community, not just community benefits, but actually owning some of this infrastructure as well. I'm visiting a scheme in Scotland in a few weeks' time where the community is able to not just have a battery storage project owned by the community, but a wind turbine that fills the battery in the first place, so they get a double benefit from the energy they're generating and able to store. These are the kind of schemes we'd like to see more of right across the country.
Good job.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a certain amount of sympathy for the member for Widnes and Halewood, who I think the Minister slightly fobbed off with his answer. So now that the Minister's had a chance to calm down and check his notes, I'll ask it again on his behalf and just say, what's your government actually done in order to advance the case of nuclear energy since you took over power?
Good question. Yeah.
Well, it's a very good question, but thank you to the honourable gentleman for giving me a second chance to reiterate the point that, of course, what we inherited was a whole series of plans not delivered. And what we've done is move forward as quickly as possible to deliver those significant projects, but also to move forward the competition on small modular reactors. The honourable gentleman, the Shadow Minister, says all you had to do was sign it off. I think he forgets maybe what state he left some of his policies in when he departed office.
Mr Llafariaeth, as well as improving energy storage, we should be improving energy efficiency within our homes as well. And the average EPC for the properties in Caerfyrddin in my constituency is D, the fourth lowest in Wales, and the government plans to increase EPC in rented properties to C by 2030. So when it comes to meeting this aim through insulation, what lessons can be learned from previous schemes, such as the Eco4 scheme, which has been beset with problems, including contractors carrying out poor work on properties of older and vulnerable parents and people?
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady for that question. It's a really important point, and my Honourable friend, the Minister for Consumers, is leading on a review of some of this work at the very moment, and we'll have more to say about it soon, because I think not only do we need a scheme that rolls out far more insulation to retrofit homes, we also, of course, have driven forward a higher standard for new houses to make sure that we're building new houses already at a better standard. But some of the actual schemes and the delivery of them has been questionable in places, and I recognise some of the points that she makes, so that's partly what we've been reviewing. The other part of the work, of course, is I've been in Wales recently meeting the my Welsh counterpart to talk about some of the planning regulations they're moving forward in Wales, which will also make a difference on these kind of projects.
Richard Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In 2022, following the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, we saw huge government subsidy for household energy bills and an additional support to households of an extra £15 billion per year. I appreciate that gas is traded globally and that the gas price moves globally, but if storage capacity had been greater in 2022, could any of that £15 billion have been saved for taxpayers?
Minister. I think it's a really interesting question, and it's a question I asked myself when I came into this role. And of course, logically, we might assume that that would in fact be the case. But of course, the topping up of the gas storage over time, because we don't empty the gas storage and then wait to refill it, we refill it constantly, will be at whatever price it's traded on in the market at that time. And of course, the main reason why we would have used the gas in the storage is because actually there's such demand in the system that the price is likely to be higher anyway. So I think it's a really important point, but I don't think gas storage would actually have been the issue. And I reiterate the point I made at the beginning, that part of the reason why we have less gas storage in this country compared to other European countries is that we have quite a different mix of different routes to get gas in, particularly far more reliable supply chains for it, so we don't need to store quite as much as our European neighbours.
Jim Shellen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Minister very much for his answers and for so far what he has said. There are approximately 330,000 Northern Ireland homes and businesses connected to gas, and there's also a scheme for social housing to convert to gas energy as well. That means that some of our elderly and most vulnerable have no access to heating other than gas. So, Minister, how can government ensure that the most vulnerable in our society can be guaranteed their gas supply over the next number of weeks? And how can government keep those in priority need at the top of the supply chain? Thank you.
Well, characteristically, the Honourable Gentleman raises an important point. I know he's raised similar points with me before about this, and it is important that the most vulnerable on the priority registers are prioritised for any kind of additional support, and that's what we continue to do. Of course, energy is transferred in Northern Ireland, so I don't directly have a role to play in the gas system in Northern Ireland, but I continue to engage with both the ministers in the Northern Ireland Executive that have an interest in this topic, and we've talked about those issues most recently.
Right, we'll let the front bench change over.